We are now officially live.
All right.
Jason, Dorito, Perz. Uh, so this spurred very randomly the idea for this conversation. I don't even really know where the inspiration for it came from, but I thought that it would be really good for us to have a conversation out there that people could reference about the financial side of BMX, mainly an informational guide on or blueprint on how to kind of navigate finances in BMX because
Mhm.
there's a lot of life after pro stories and questions and all of this stuff in other podcasts, and a lot of people talk about how there's no like real blueprint for this side of things. And I thought, well, why don't we make that blueprint?
Yeah.
And Dorito here was the perfect person to ask about this because Dorito has pretty much done all of the BMX stuff and moved into the financial world in several different ways. So, first of all, maybe just give the quick rundown on like your history through BMX as well as the things that like make you qualified for this subject.
Okay. Yeah. Riding BMX, I started riding when I was, 12. I started competing at about 14. I absolutely fell in love with riding. It was like my passion. I would have died for riding every day of the week. I got obsessed with it, rode, 4 to 5 hours a day, every single day. And then as the years went on, I went on to ride in professional contests, and then I started riding in shows and so on. So basically, I've been in all different types of ways. I've been sponsored. So there's been a bunch of different aspects of riding because that's the thing with BMX. There's so many different avenues. There's people who make video parts, and you can make money off of that, which I did at one point too. You can do shows, which you make money off of that. You can do contests. You make money from winning contests. You can be sponsored. You can make money from sponsorships and so on. So basically, through all that, I've gotten to travel and see that part of BMX. And then as the years went on, I got into the industry of BMX. I started Thriller BMX, which was a show team. So before that, I was a manager of Maximum Velocity Stunt Team. I ran that for years, did shows for them for years as well. I also did shows for Mirage Entertainment, which they did like entertainment all over the world for like Six Flags amusement parks and whatever amusement park anywhere. Yeah, I was in India and China and all types of really interesting places for that. And then as the years went on, when I got into my own show team, we did shows all over the world as well. Thriller was a very successful show team for a long time. 2020 kind of decimated it, and I was already kind of doing something else anyways, which is what I'm doing today. Which today I do. I have a research company which we do research on different financial instruments. We do back testing for certain big companies. We do. We also manage money for clients. We do basically just about everything across the board in that field. We have workers all over. We have workers in India and so on. So it's a very awesome business, very successful at the moment as well. And then I also take money from hedge funds, and so they allocate money to me to manage for them. So they have hedge funds are bigger money, so that way I don't have to go through a million different people to raise money, which for myself, I'm better with that. I'm not really the best with people, so that's how I got to here today.
That's a really cool story. I mean, you also have experience with other businesses outside of finances and BMX too, don't you?
Yep. Construction and so on. So and not to mention real estate. There's lots of different things that I've been involved in over the years and branched out to, and that's something we can kind of get into today because that I like that you came up with this idea and it was really well thought out because it's something that like you don't think about when you're riding. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't, 'cause you're competing at that high level. And what comes after isn't something any of us really ever talk about. And then one day we're there, and I feel like it's more depressing than anything for most people. I still talk to a lot of friends. I actually had a buddy of mine come up to me. I won't even name his name, but he came up to me and he was like, "Man, it's great that you're okay with like not being that good at riding anymore, you know. And he was trying to say it in like a nice way, like, you know, I'm glad that you moved on in your life, but like at the same time, it is very hard to get older and go like, hey, like, you know, I can't ride exactly the same way. I mean, I guess I could, you know, you can,
Yeah.
but there will be a point where you really can't, you know, when you're in their late 40s, 50s, you know, at some point these things will slow down, and so that's what we're kind of getting at today, and how you manage it in the meantime.
Right, and the importance of when you actually start thinking about these things, because in reality, the earlier the better. Um,
Yes.
so one really important thing that we wanted to make sure that people understood throughout this entire subject is that the education side of it is the most important part, and every single thing that we're going to be talking about today can be researched further on your own independently. There's videos on YouTube, books, all kinds of different resources for every single thing that we're going to talk about.
Yes. Absolutely, and remember, you know, this is a YouTube video. We're gonna go an overview of these things. You know, make sure you're looking into all this stuff for yourself. And this is supposed to be the beginning of your journey.
And this is not financial advice. I feel like you have to say that on YouTube.
Good job.
But on that note, the order of the things that we're going to go into is the individual rider's perspective through like the business of BMX. Then there's the starting the business and working in the industry side of things, and then the life after pro kind of topic of things, where what comes after all of this. So the first one, the business of BMX and individual riders, or from an individual rider's perspective, being sponsored, and then I guess you kind of hit on all of, not all of, but a lot of the different avenues that you can make money in BMX through. But I think the more important part is the overreaching topic of all of this, and the things you talked about when we were raised, like the 1099 forms, and how to learn about managing your life and finances and all of those types of things.
Yeah, so you know, when we're kids, you know, these are things that aren't really taught or even talked about, you know, even as a normal American families, they're very scared to have those conversations. I remember the first time I was overseas and having a conversation with the family, and right at the dinner table, they're talking about finances. And, you know, this is something we don't do in the States, even though we should. It's not talked about in school, it's not talked about anywhere. So, as an individual rider, like, you know, if you ride shows, you ride contests, whatever it is, you're most likely going to get a 1099 form, and nobody tells you exactly how to work with those. You get the money all up front. So if you win a contest, let's say it's a $10,000 contest to make it an even number, you win a $10,000. Okay, great. So then at the end of the year, you get a 1099 form, and you have to file that in your taxes. So normally you would have to pay the full amount of tax if you do nothing and you just file it, but there's lots of ways you can write off. So basically, making a small spreadsheet is the easiest thing. So I was fortunate to have my grandmother was actually a great person for me to have, because she was one who really kind of taught me that, hey, this is something you need to write out. You need to write out every time you buy something that pertains to BMX. Your car is a write-off because you're using that in BMX. Your gas money to go to the bike park back and forth. Your pads, every single bike park, all of these things are a write-off. Clothing, everything.
Entry for a skate park,
Yep.
contest entry fees, these types of things. Also,
Hmm.
just a disclaimer, we're not tax professionals either. This is not tax advice. I don't know if that's the same as financial advice, but continue.
Yeah, so you know, these are things that basically you want to have all this stuff written down, and then when you go to your tax person at the end of the year, this is what you hand them. You hand them something that has, you can hand them a million receipts, but you really want to have everything written out nice and smooth, and not to mention you can sit there and really kind of come up with ideas, you know, like, okay, well, this is how much I've spent this year on this. Maybe that was insane, maybe that was too much. Your food, every time you go riding, you should be writing that down. You know, are you on a road trip and you have to eat 3 times a day? And so when you're eating 2, 3 times a day, you need to be putting that down. Your gas money, you need to be putting that down. So at the end of the year, when you get these things and you owe this $10,000, and you don't have to you're using all these write-offs, so you don't have to pay as much to the IRS because you're not using all that money. Like you didn't
Yeah.
just get that money, you're using it to continue to compete. When
Right.
you're traveling on a plane to a contest, that's
Yep.
a write-off. Like, so you want to continue to keep track of these things. And a lot of people, especially like when you're starting to ride, these are things like they get away from you.
Oh
And
yeah.
you got to remember too, the other end is the IRS does hotels, they're a write-off. But there's important things about this. So you don't just want to go, okay, it's on my bank account, I'm great. Keep the actual receipts,
Mm.
make notes of it. So gas receipts you can actually have in your bank account, and food receipts under $100 they can be in your bank account. And so you can print that out at the end of the year, which is smart. That's what I do every single year. I go and print out all of my every single bank account, business wise or personal. I print that all out at the end of the year, so I have it. But when it comes to hotel receipts, you have to get the receipt upon checking out of the hotel. So when you're going out of a hotel, they want that because just in case you were like buying room service or
Mm.
doing something else, they need the one upon checking out. Yes, I know we're BMXers. We stay at Motel 8s or Super 8s and Holiday Inns, and they don't have room service.
Yeah.
But still, the IRS doesn't give a shit. So
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. So basically, between all of those things, like what we're talking about is just having this little plan and this little bit of information, having this spreadsheet of, hey, this is exactly how much I spent on this all the time, just in front of you, and going over it once a month or once a year to give to them. That's really gonna give you a major edge and just kind of understanding also how much am I spending on this shit. Like you have no idea really, because that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that comes it gets in your head a lot when you don't think about it, and then all of a sudden at the end of the year you're out of whatever money you used, you're all out of it, and you're like, well, where did it all go?
Yeah.
So that makes it even more important that you're looking at your 1099 form and going, okay, I owe this $10,000, but I have all these write-offs. Here you go, tax person, use all these write-offs, because you plug them in different areas. They have
Right.
different types of write-offs for food and so on and so forth.
Maintenance
All
and
important.
random
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep, car receipts. You're so don't not just buying your car, but also working on your car.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely have not utilized that as much as I should the first year that I actually worked with 1099 stuff through YouTube and all of that. And
Yeah,
then the really important thing is keeping that uh, journal and keeping the documentation of everything that we're talking about here with the write-offs and all of the stuff that you have to spend things on, because at the end of the year it's really hard to remember every single thing, and every single thing that you forget is something that you should have used as that write-off, and then you don't get the benefit that you should have from it because it was a business expense.
yeah, and exactly like we were talking, like I was talking about earlier, which is like set a day a month, and so many people are like, man, I don't want to do like, dude, it's not that big of a deal.
It's not that hard either.
Set a day of the month, take your go through your bank statements, write everything down, like your food and your gas, and then keep your receipts and just write everything straight down. It's very
Yep.
easy. Make sure you keep all your receipts. You're supposed to keep them all for at least 5 years, just in case you were to get audited. And also, good thing to know is if you do get audited, because a lot of BMXers have gotten audited, are with the way the 1099s work and everything, it can trigger very easily. So if you do get audited, and your stuff's really clear, like, okay, here's everything's written down perfectly, and they
Mm.
go, because what they do to test you out is they go, okay, well, here's this receipt, this is what triggered it, your car needed to get fixed, it was $6,000 last year, we want to see the receipt for that. If you
Yeah.
can go, here's a receipt, and do that like for a hotel and a couple other things, they're going to leave you alone. That's going to be the end of it. But if you go, there,
Oh.
you're screwed. That's when they start to really come at you.
Yeah, and what I do personally is I have a note in my phone that's like 2021 taxes, and every single time that's like a big thing, anything over like 30 or $40, I put it in there and I put the costs so that I know exactly what I need to do. And then there's apps for tracking your mileage so that you can put your miles in there, and then it makes it all nice and neat for your tax person so that They don't have to be like, all right, so how many trips did you go on that you drove, and where'd you go, and how long were you? Yeah, it just makes
You
it a
should
lot
name
easier.
the app of that. That's
It's a Mile IQ is the one that I use, and I used to rely on the GPS part of it, but there were so many times where like I would go to raise and it just wouldn't register the drive, and I
Mhm.
didn't realize that I could add it manually. So I was just like, "Oh, I guess I'm not gonna count this one because
Yeah.
I just I lost out on it." When in reality you can just enter them in manually as it happens, and that I feel that's the way it works best for me. I think a really good way to put it is just like you got to find what works best for you.
Yeah. And there's the other angle of it too, is at the very least, you can at least have your miles for the entire year. Like,
Yep.
here's your miles for the year. What was the average gas price? You can Google that. It comes up in 5 seconds. Boom. That's your miles for the year. There's the average gas price. This is exactly what I use. Tax person. There you go. Make sure your bank statement. You use one card for these things. That's the other thing that's important is make sure if you have a debit card, you're using the same card for all these expenses that pertain to BMX. This is also another thing that we get into. We talked about this a little bit. Is you can also LLC yourself as a BMX rider. A lot of people don't utilize this. It's very in Ohio. It's literally $100.
Mm.
You go online, you LLC yourself, and then boom, you're Brantmore BMX. Boom, there we go. I have my own thing. Now I have certain other things that are helpful. Like so for like we talked about with the car, if you have a $10,000 1099 form, and then you spend let's say $50,000 for a car,
Yeah.
and nice, really nice car, but let's say you bought a $50,000, and so then you could go, okay, well, with normally that would be null and void. So you'd be able to use that write off 1 year,
Yeah.
but you have $40,000 left over. Like that'd be a lot less than that actually, but we'll use an even number to make it easy.
Yeah.
So let's say you owe $10,000. You'd have $40,000 left over, but if you have an LLC, now you can use $10,000 the next year, and then you can use
Mm.
$10,000 the next year, and then you
Okay.
can do that to 5 years. So you're getting these write-offs year after year after year. Whereas if you just have a normal 1099, you're just an individual, you're not getting any of those benefits.
That's interesting and a good thing to think about too. So I feel like we've covered this pretty well. Is there anything else from the individual rider's perspective before we talk about like the things that you need to start thinking about while you're that individual rider doing contests, shows, whatever it might be?
No, because I think that that covers it pretty well. We're basically that's a good overview of what we'd want to be doing and looking at as an individual rider getting 1099 forms. W-2s, you can still get those same type of write-offs. Let's say you're working in the industry or something and you're interested in something like this, you can still use a lot of these write-offs. So you can still keep track of these things, but the tax works a little bit different.
Okay, so you're still an individual rider who's getting the 1099. You're riding contests and shows and you're doing well. What types of things do we need to think about for the future now to start setting yourself up for the future?
Yeah, Ron Thomas always tells a funny story, which is when he was on the road, and I used to do this too. Is he'd bring books on the road, and he had a book, I think it was like Investing for Dummies or something, and he said that like everybody on the road basically like made fun of him super hard about this, and if anybody knows Ron now, like Ron's super successful guy, like extremely successful. Loves what he does every day. Basically, real estate tycoon these days. Has a really great building in Wyandotte, Michigan's kind of like a WeWork type facility. Very cool stuff. So it's like you want to be thinking about these things early, and you're in your 18, 19, 20. It's not a bad idea to say, okay, well, I at least you don't have to. People want to specialize, right? Because that's what we do as humans. We want to go, okay, I want to be a trader. I want to own a construction company. I want to be in real. Don't think like that. Think I want just a general education. So generally, like, there's very easy to read books, and they're not going to give you secrets. They're just going to help you with your mindset. Like things like The Millionaire Next Door is a great book, which is one that's about people who are actually millionaires, and how that's different than what you think. So you think millionaires are the people who are driving around Ferraris and crazy cars and all this stuff, but really the book shows that millionaires are actually the people who live in a very normal house. They actually just save their money like crazy. They drive a normal car. You would never guess it in a million years. And especially now, like with my clients, like I see that day after day, which is my client, the client who's actually the wealthiest client I have, and he's into over 100 million. He drives around a old Honda Civic. Granted it's in good condition, but the guy could buy a Ferrari and it wouldn't even make a dent in how much this guy actually has overall. But he's driving around this car. He wants his kids, what he told me is he wants his kids never to think like how much they actually have and think they have this huge advantage on the world, and start using that and asking him for money and all these things. So he wants to kind of grow them up in a very different way, kind of like how he grew up. And so like you see this over and over again, that it's not about the money for these people. It's more about what they do. They actually enjoy what they do. They love the game. And so that's most of the reason why they're interested in accumulating. So reading that book is kind of like the first step in going, like, because the first thing I would have kids do shows with me, and they would ask me questions and be like, so, what do you do with your money? Like when you make, how much money is enough money to like start like living it up? And I'd be like, I mean, I don't know, like, how much. It doesn't, there's not an exact number on this, but it's like you really don't. If you need to live that way, that's something. But if you don't need to live that way, continue to save, continue to accumulate, and just do the right thing day after day. Which the right thing is, instead of going, okay, I have I'm gonna blow all this money on this stupid thing, or I'm gonna buy this crazy car, like I'm gonna buy a new Audi or something. Like, go buy that Toyota or a Honda Civic and then stuff, 10 grand away, and continue to do that over and over again. These things compounded over years, like even think about something like $300 a month, putting away that little bit month after month, that adds up.
Yeah.
In a year, you're talking over 3 grand. So, you can do this over and over again and continue to stack money and put money away. And then that adds up. And the whole point of having money isn't to, show everybody how much money you have or what sick car you have. It's about stability. Now you don't have to worry about things. Now you're going, okay, well, I have this much money in the bank right now. If my car blows up, I'm not terrified. If this happens to if I break my teeth out riding my bike, like, I'm not going, oh my God, I can't buy new teeth. These things are all very important. And so this is all kind of part of the journey. And I think that's a great book to start with, just because it's very simple. And the other one is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a very like basic book, but it's also the mindset of having like that. You have that mindset your whole life that like you can't be rich, you can't get money, you can't do these things because this is this magical thing, and you can't start a business, and you can't do and you tell yourself that in your head, like, I can't do any of these things, I'm not good enough to do these things, and so on. That's the asshole rich people. But really, like, you find out that most people who are very wealthy, very successful in business, they're self-starters. They started this on their own. They decided they were going to do it, and they fought hard to do it. And I think being a bike rider is a major edge in that sense. I think a lot of bike riders don't think about that. Like, if you are a bike rider, you have been smacked in the face many times and had to get up over and over again. And, something that kind of woke me up was when I was a junkie. My friend, Tony, he looked at me one day and he was like, man, you come up with money every single day. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't even care. And I was like, whatever. And he's like, dude, you come up with money every, and I'm sitting there going like, yeah, dude, I have a problem. Like, that's what people who have problems do. And he's like, no, like, he's like, what if you just focus that on a business? Like, that same drive you had for bike riding, that same drive you have to do this every day. Like, why don't you just start a business and have that same drive for that? And, that made a lot of sense to me at that point of going, okay, well, maybe I can have that drive in something else and something different, and it does, and you just have to be okay with failure. And as bike riders, that's something we're okay with,
Right.
failing, trying again.
Right. So other aspects to think about. So you're talking about changing your mindset or expanding your mind a little bit too. Is it a good time to start thinking about maybe some type of potential business idea or product or retirement fund type stuff too?
Yeah, I mean, you can now once again it depends on your level of like what exactly you're making from BMX, what
Right.
exactly you're making on side jobs and so on. So, if you need we're talking about tax write-offs, and basically like for riders, most generally in riding BMX, like we're not making millions, like so, and generally in riding BMX we're talking about it'd be great to get these write-offs. But there's also other aspects if you are in that making more money than just the $10,000 or so on a year, you can also put money into your IRA. That basically now you're taking money out of your cash for the end of the year, putting it into something, so you get a write-off on that sense. You can use a Roth IRA, which is tax deferred, meaning you're paying your taxes up front. You can do all of these things. You can invest money, sitting there and putting money away, compounding. Like, not saying everybody should be a trader, because trading is very hard, but
Yeah.
putting some money away into a retirement and sticking it in, the S&P 500 and some bonds, and leaving it for 20 years isn't a bad idea. Something very stable. I think the average rate of return is, I have it up here actually right now, which is 9% a year. Something at 9% a year, a lot of people think, that isn't anything crazy, but really, if you compound that in 30 years, and that's your retirement in 30, 40 years, like that becomes a lot of money. 10 grand even becomes a lot of money at that point.
Yeah.
So, think of things like that.
I mean, even at 9% a year, if you make 10,000 extra dollars, you save 10,000 extra dollars from changing your mindset and changing some of the way you think about things, and you put that into directly right there, boom, that's $900 you wouldn't have had you not, or had you have just bought something, or you bought the more fancy car, whatever that is. And I think a really good thing to think about here is just training yourself to think about things a little bit differently, and just realizing that you need to do that.
Yes. And that's really important. That's well said. And because that's so important. And I think the simple thing that I started to do at the beginning was doing things like, I mean, I was into Bitcoin very early, so like taking a little bit of money, putting it in something like
Yeah.
that. I'm not recommending doing anything. Once again, this is
Right,
not
exactly. You're just
advice,
telling
but
your personal experience.
my personal story was, I put some money into there, and then, I would, you have an extra 500, extra $1,000 at some point. You go, okay, well, I'm gonna buy some silver. I'm gonna go by the silver store, buy some silver. I'm gonna buy some gold. Things that I know, like, I can't just exchange easily. Also things like you can make your bank accounts basically take money out of your account, putting it into your savings every week if you want to. Something like $100. Just continually to do this over and over again, and building up your savings, because that's the thing, like, you never know. Also, that's another important part, which you never know how much money you need, because there might be some business idea that comes up for you in your head in the next 10 years, and if you have $0, you can't exactly do that idea.
Right,
But if you
exactly.
have something like, you saved $10,000, $20,000, that's the beginning of any small business basically. So, you might need a truck, you might need a trailer, whatever it is, you can start with that. And so just stuffing your money away, and kind of understanding that the journey is also part of this. You're on a long road. You don't know where it's going to end up, but knowing that I'm just going to continue to do the right thing, continue to save, continue not to, overspend or do anything crazy. You never know where you could end up in 10 years.
Right, absolutely. And I think we can see the people in BMX who are making these smart choices, and there's a little bit of it talked about and shown on social media, where some people will put their some of their stuff out there for like what they're doing. And obviously we see whenever somebody starts their clothing company, or they're starting a new brand or something like that. And I feel like this is a good transition just to get into the starting a business in BMX, or working in the industry side of things. with the working in the industry side, I think what we wanted to talk about too is like the 1099 mindset and things can still exist in that side.
What do you mean exactly?
Yesterday, you were talking about how if you work in the industry and you're not that you're a rider, but you could still get that 1099 and you still want to think about the same things.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, yeah, exactly. So and not to mention there's, so many people who we know that are, welders or workers for certain companies who have, plowed a lot. And this is also another thing that's very important. And this goes a little bit off topic, but it's on the topic. So basically we had a rider that came to ride for Thriller. And we all love riding BMX so much. Like we do it for free every day. We
Yeah.
love doing it. And this guy came and he said, "Hey, I love doing this. I do this for free." Now, luckily he said that to me. Any other show team owner would have been like, "Oh, great. Here, you could do it for free all the time.
Yeah.
I'll buy your food. You're great." And I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, man, like you never want to do that for free." And you actually said a good quote yesterday. You could actually add that in. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, the money sustains passion thing. I was
Yes.
on a work trip and a farmer for that we were at filming at his farm talked about how money sustains passion because he was very focused on the business aspect of things because he just loves being a farmer, just like we love being BMX riders. But the reality of it is you need money to be able to ride. So that's kind of part of why I wanted to have this conversation too, is that side.
Yeah, and that's perfect because you're right. And so that's the conversation I had with him, which is like, no, like, yeah, but this is a business here. So as this is a business and I'm offering to pay you, you need to get paid. You deserve to be paid for this. You ride a contest, you should be paid. And that's the thing that's kind of gotten a lot. It's kind of happened so much in BMX that, and you can see it kind of weighing on BMX where not as many people are getting into it because they're not able to see it like we used to see it. When there was money in it, there was events, there was all these things. Now, if everybody did it for free, there's none of those events. There's
Mm-hmm.
none of these things popping up, which is why we're kind of seeing that dragging at the moment. But I had that conversation with him, like, look, no, like you deserve this money. Like, not to mention you're riding for my company. You could get hurt, all these things. So this is very important that you understand that you need to be paid. And that's something that I think a lot of people in riding, like we all love it so much. And we understand like the companies are fragile and we understand they're not bringing a ton of money in sometimes, so we'd love to all do everything for free, but we can't. And those companies, I can tell you for sure, they don't do it for free either.
Right.
So you shouldn't be asking any of the riders to do anything for free. And that's another thing I want to get into too, which is there's a lot of people, and now I can say this because I'm outside of the industry, so screw everybody. But but it's there's a lot of people in that industry and show industry, and I worked for some of them that would just screw you over. And these are things that are, I mean, I can tell you a story about one time I was doing a show. It was me and Joel Harding. The owner of the company told us to drive all the way to Eastern Pennsylvania, which was like 9 hours away. We drove all the way out there. We did the show. After the show, he said, "Well, I don't think I really like need to pay you guys gas money. Like I could have got somebody else to do it who didn't have to drive that far." And I was like, "Well, you said you would." That's the end of it. And so we kept going back and forth, and finally I had to go to his car, grab the keys out of his vehicle, which towed the ramps and everything, and I sat on the curb waiting. We just waited there for 4 or 5 hours until he paid us. These are things that happen. Not to mention, there's been lots of stories of people just not getting paid.
Yeah.
There was a guy that he had I don't even care, Solution Action Sports. He had a company in Indiana. He screwed over a lot of BMX riders. They were out of a lot of money. He didn't pay anybody anything. I did a show for him once where he didn't pay me, and that was my company, so I still had to pay all my riders and everything while he didn't pay us. So there's a lot of shady people in a lot of these industries, and in the show industry, they're there too. So make sure you're always covering your ass. That's always a very important thing. And if you feel like somebody's shady, because this is the thing I'd always tell my riders, if you feel like this dude's shady and you go do that show, that's on you at that point.
Yeah.
If you feel like he's shady, just don't do it. Don't go. There's plenty of people who are good people who do this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really good point to bring up, just because of how much of that can go on that people don't talk about, because some people are just, they're not in a position that they can talk about it because they're scared that it might affect some other aspect of their life. And we all know that BMX riders don't get paid tons of money unless you're like at the very, very tippy top. So if you're worried about where your rent money is going to come from, you might not be willing to speak up about something like that. So it's a really good thing to talk about.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, and also it had the Medina Fair. He did that Medina Fair, and he had a bunch of riders come in. A bunch of people that we know.
Yeah.
Uh, he called a bunch of my guys. They all went to do this event. He told all the riders that he didn't get paid for the event. That was a lie. He said that they did such a bad job that he didn't get paid, and it was a 2-week event. Now, when you do every day is a payday, so that's a lot of money. He just didn't pay anybody,
Yeah, it's
you know.
crazy.
So these things are pretty terrible, but
So,
I'm happy about it.
another thing that I thought about that we should mention in all of this is that when you save that money on the side that we've been talking about this entire time, it also can mean you have money for something like health insurance, which we typically, BMX riders just don't get health insurance, and a lot of people just don't have health insurance because of it.
Yeah,
Just something to think about with that. Whenever you, if you're able to be smarter about your money, you'll be able to afford something like health insurance, which can prevent you from getting into the spot that so many people have gotten stuck into by not having it, and then having something terrible happen. And I hope that this conversation can just help at least one of those type of people.
yeah. I mean, that's something that I learned very early on. I mean, there was a pro rider is really good to me growing up. Taught me a lot of things, just how to be a human in general. Very good guy, but once again, at that point, a lot of the riders were. This was when BMX was really dead, early '90s. So he grew up riding and living in the skate park. And so he actually like memorized another person's social security number, like crazy things like that were like becoming very normal back then for BMX riders.
Yeah.
Luckily the sport changed a bit, but now there's things like healthcare.gov. That's actually something that a resource that people should know about. That it's very brand new. They just passed a new law very recently, so you can go to healthcare.gov. You can get on a plan that's pretty cheap. So very easy to get healthcare now. That's a much better way to get it.
Wow, that's really good to know. I didn't know that even
It's brand new.
existed.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about starting a business in BMX. I don't know if there's anything that we didn't cover that we needed to with that, or what.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things aspects of it. One is you have to, no matter what the business is, you have to love doing it because that's the way you are able to push through in tough times. If you don't love doing it, you will stop doing it very quickly, and the second everything gets hard, you will throw it away. So we see a lot of people coming to BMX and starting something, but it's also important to understand that you can do that business as a side project and be like, okay, it's just a side project. I'm just having fun with this. We'll see where it goes. Or if you're serious about it, just make sure there's some monetary aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things anymore, and I think there's a lot of cool businesses in the space of tech now. Research like what I do. You're talking about a business that I don't have to exactly have an office building. I don't have to have a truck. I don't have to have a trailer. I don't have to have all these things. Drop shipping company where you're shipping tires between, you're from a distributor shipping directly to people. You're able to get some slight discount to do this. You find a company that's you really like, that's a good friend of yours, and you're the go-between for that. There's a lot of little things you could do without actually owning a major business. So that's kind of a good way to think of things, but also remember that BMX is kind of at a tough state right now. So if you do have a business in it, make sure there's possibly other things that you can do to sustain yourself. If you're a welder, maybe you also weld pipes or something, doing something different on the side. Maybe you build mountain bike frames for the time being just to make some extra money from time to time so you can sustain yourself in this industry. Because right now the industry is in a tough spot. It goes through cycles, though. I'm a firm believer that BMX, you'll see it. 80s were booming, early 90s were not. 2000, early 2000s, it was great. Right now, it's not. So, I think it's just going to be cyclical again. I think we'll see it pick up all over again. But just understand that we're in a tough time right now. So if you do start a business in this industry, just be very careful.
And I think that a lot of what we talked about in the individual rider's perspective thing carries on over to the starting a business side, because, and you're going to be able to talk about this way more, but there's a lot of things that you got to learn if you're going to start a business, and things that you need to know about tax stuff. Just it's a totally different mindset. Running a business and owning a business is a totally different mindset from just, I ride and go to contests, so I get paid from that. So I think you'd be able to talk even more about that.
Yeah, perfect. I can talk about the show industry just because I was a part of it, and that'd be the easiest for me. So, you start riding, and I'm lucky that I got to move through this. I worked from the bottom up. I was the rider to the assistant manager to the manager, and then I started my own business. So I understood how the money worked at that point. So when you start doing shows and you hear that people are getting 1,500 a day for shows, that sounds insane. It sounds like a ton of money. You're like, oh my God, I'm getting $200 a day, 250 to do a show, but I could get this much to if I start my own team. And so you start your own team, and then you realize you buy a truck, you've got to buy probably a diesel because you're going to be towing a lot. So you're talking about 25K, 30, now like 40K.
Way more, yeah.
Yeah, and that was back then. And then as time moved on, you know, we're all you have to buy a trailer, and you buy all these things, and you're spending about $80,000 to really get started in a good way. And so, okay, now you're starting out this new business, and you've got 80K. You do a show for 1,500, and you're like, man, I just paid $80,000 for a $1,500 show. It
Yep.
sounds very different. So, but that's what happened a lot in this industry is that guys would get into it, they would buy their truck and trailer, and they wouldn't think more than 5 seconds out, and they'd go, oh well, this guy's charging 1,500, I'll charge 500. I'm still making more money than I was. And they continued to do that to the point where the shows got so devalued over and over again. And that's something that you have to really think about as a business owner, which is you never want to start lower because number one, you're in charge of other bike riders. Like if you're in this industry and you love bike riding, you better love other bike riders. That's number one above all else. So you need to be able to pay them. There can never be a time, even, I mean, there's been show, and my riders can tell anybody this, and I say this publicly, is that there's been plenty of times where I have gotten screwed over in some way, and I have never not paid my riders, ever. I pride myself on that because this is BMX. We're a brotherhood. Like, that's what we do. And so, like, you have to always understand that. So these prices are also this way just in case something does happen. So, understanding that, hey, like, yeah, maybe that sounds like I'm making more money, but in the end of the day, like after I paid $80,000 and you don't know all the other costs, at that time, which is insurance. You got to have insurance. You got to have $1 million to $5 million policy, depending on what you're doing shows for, and that can be upwards of 10 grand a year. So you have to have all these things all the time and all these things. And so the one thing that I can say is make sure you're have this ability to charge a good amount of money and understand that you're going to need that money. There's a reason why those fees are that way. And not to mention, don't devalue an industry. That's what happened in the show industry.
That happened in just the sponsorship industry too. It was just a race
Exactly.
to the bottom because every single kid was so stoked to get a T-shirt and a pair of grips or whatever it was that they would ride for free, or they would ride for a pair of grips or whatever, and then it just devalues everybody else above them who's getting paid. to do the same type of riding.
Exactly, and that's exact well said, and that needed to be said because that's what happened so much. It was in my era, it was cool because the like guys who were higher ups would grab dudes like me and be like, if this person has to sponsor you, that like Chad Kagi, like people like that would tell you the truth about random things and kind of have you, this is what you make. You do not go under this. This will wreck it for all of us, and everybody worked together in that. In normal business, that's very normal. In construction, that's normal in construction. That's normal in any business ever. But in
Yeah.
BMX is the only one I've ever been in where everybody, because everybody's got that mentality of competition.
Right. It's everybody's out for themselves for the most part, so they're not even in a conversation with somebody else because that other person might take away what I'm trying to get or whatever it
Yeah.
might be.
And it's everybody's right to be in competition for yourself, but when you're in competition for yourself and it's hurting yourself, actually, that's when it gets bad. And that's what we see so much, like you mentioned, with sponsorships. In the show industry, it was the same thing where people, we'd have a good thing set up, and I would say, okay, well, within this, you're within 2 hours of your house, like you want to charge whatever you want, whatever. But when you're further than that, like the second we drive, like we have to buy a hotel room, we have to pay more in gas, we have to pay more in insurance. All of these things come up. So, and not to mention, what if something breaks? So, if all of these things come up and your prices is still crap, you're going to get screwed at some point. And it's the same thing as sponsorships. Now there you see that there's not as many people riding. Sponsorships aren't paying nearly as much as they used to. They don't have to. If this person does this trick and they do well in contests and they're also 18, but this 30-year-old's getting paid major money in their book, and then this 18-year-old says he'd do it for half. What's the company gonna do? Well, the company ends up going, screw it, I'll take this kid for half. And they
Right.
continue to do that over and over and over again until it just waters down everything.
Right. And I think you hit on a extremely important aspect to business and sponsor, just every single aspect of making money in life is that you need to understand and know the value of what you're doing and what you're selling, whatever it might be, and you have to put a realistic price tag on it so that you're not getting screwed, so that you don't buy that $80,000 rig and then don't make whatever X amount of dollars that you need in the year so that you can pay your bills and pay your riders and pay everything that you have to pay and still come out making money in the end, because there's so much of that short-sightedness in every single business that exists because people don't think far enough ahead to realize that there's an equation basically that you need to understand for how you get to your cost and how you make what you need to make in the year.
Yes, and if you go into a business and you see that there's another like for example, you see a bike frame. You see a bike frame and you go, dude, it's just some steel. Okay, you look online, you go, okay, the steel cost $50, and then and I'm not exactly sure right now because steel's insane.
Right, it's just making it up.
Yeah. And so let's say steel's $50 and to weld it's, gonna take me 5 hours. And you're like, well, let's just say $20 an hour. And then you come up with this stupid equation. You go, okay, well, I could start frames and I could sell them for $200. I'll make $50 a frame. It'll be fine. Most of the time, there's a reason why things cost what they do. So not to mention the bike shows are the easiest one for me to go to, which is, we had to buy welders. What if we had to replace ramps? We have to modify ramps. We have to do all types of things. This thing's my random costs. I mean, I know my costs per year were like $20,000.
Repairs on the truck.
Just repairs on the truck and trailer. Yeah,
Yeah.
repairs. I mean, there was one time. And then you also have, this is important in all businesses, which is black swan events. So I had a great black swan event with Thriller right after you spend all that money starting up that we just talked about. We were driving. It was me, Rob Gill, and Tommy Crail. And we're driving back from some shows in New Jersey. And we get right across the border into PA, and you hear boom. And all of a sudden something goes bink, bink, bink. So the drive shaft let go of my transmission because my transmission actually exploded. and the drive shaft let go and went spinning, and it just beat the engine. It just literally kept spinning and beat the crap out of the big diesel engine. So, huge Allison transmission destroyed. Not a repair transmission, like had to get a whole new transmission. The wiring harnesses, top and bottom, were destroyed. Everything was destroyed on the truck. It even ripped the brake lines out on the way out. So it was just a ridiculous repair that I had to spend, because the diesels cost a lot more to repair. So I had to spend about $20,000 right there that day to get that all done. So then you're renting to do shows the next couple of weeks. We had to rent a truck, do all the rent, keep the rentals going, so I'm paying for a rental while I'm paying this $20,000. But this is all very normal in business, and you either learn like I did through like trial and error. I've been doing things with businesses my whole life, so it's a lot of trial and error, or you learn and go, well, this guy here just said all this can happen, which it absolutely can, and take some notes because it does happen.
And it will. There will always be something that will happen and come up. That law, is it Murphy's law? What can
Yep.
go wrong will go wrong.
Yep.
It's gonna happen. And if you
And it
anticipate it, then guess what? You're prepared for it. And another quote that's stuck with me, just like this money sustains passion one, is that luck favors the prepared one.
Yes.
If you're prepared for that, guess what? Oh, it's lucky that I had all this extra whatever sitting around so that I can take care of it.
When I'm hired to train traders, to learn how to trade for a company, the thing I always tell them is that a person with a plan can beat somebody who's just randomly picking out things. Because at the end of the day, like if you actually have everything written down and you know exactly what you're doing and you know what can happen, that's something that black swan events are supposed to be, things you don't know can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, like, in markets, for example, that's what I do, so it's easiest for me to talk about. I know that oil has gone down 40% in a day. I know that has happened. I know the Dow has gone down 20% in a day. I know these things have happened in the past, so I'm always prepared. Even though I'm not sitting there going, this is going to happen every single day or anything, you're always prepared for the worst. You have to have your safeguards, and not to mention rehearse those things. Like rehearse in your head, how are you going to react when this happens with your business? When your transmission explodes and you want to sit there and beat your head on the steering wheel on the side of the road, but you just kind of laugh and you look at your riders and you go, crap. And not to mention, here goes another one, which is now your riders are all stuck there for another day. So if they work, they're not going to work. So what do you do then? Well, then you pay them more money. So
Yeah.
you have to think of all these expenses.
You blow out your knee. What are you going to
Yep.
do?
Yep.
From the
Black swan.
individual rider's perspective, like the injury is the type of thing that is going to keep you away from doing what you got to do, or doing what you normally do to make your living. So how do you put the proper things in place, like we're just going over here, to set yourself up to be prepared for that situation?
And that's perfect because that's something that we didn't talk about that's like right on point, which is injuries. So, and that's something that I can talk to about too. Now, I was fortunate that I worked for people who were very good to me, and but at the same time, I also worked on different sides of myself, which was I wanted to learn how to build ramps, so I did learn how to build ramps. I wanted to learn how to announce, so I learned how to announce. And so you do all these things so you can also have different things that are add value to the company. If you're hurt and you blow your knee out in a show and you can't announce, like there's no way I can't give you another job. But
Right.
if you can announce or you're at least willing to give that a shot, you can. And that the other aspect of it, let's get out of BMX. You're at home, you got hurt riding. Pick up a book, start thinking about what you might want to do otherwise. Maybe it's something totally different, because that's the thing. You can really, I found trading to be very much like riding for me, and that's why I got so interested in it. Now, not everybody's going to get that. There's going to be something else that feels like that for you. But for me, it's a this trial and error thing that if you work really hard, you try to figure out. It's this puzzle almost. I come into every single day trying to figure out this puzzle every single day. And riding is like you're trying to work on this. Like there's no such thing as perfect. Same thing with trading. There is no perfect trading. You're never going to do a perfect 360. You're never going to do a perfect tail whip. It's always could be a little bit better, a little bit different, a little bit something. So you're always constantly working on that. And I see that what we talked about yesterday, which is Jay Miron. Jay
Yeah.
Miron had a very cool video where he talks about how he's a woodworker now, and he talks about how it kind of is that same type of drive. And he's absolutely right, which is like you can find all of these things that are not bike riding, and this is important because I see so many riders who start to get out of riding and they're so depressed, and trying to find what's next, what feels like that. Number one, I can't tell you that anything really feels like being like you're for myself, like I was able to invent a trick, like I was able to travel all over doing this and riding at my top level. Like I don't know what actually feels exactly like that.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm very content. I'm very happy doing what I do today. I do get the same feeling like I did when I learned a new trick, so you just have to consistently try to find what that is. That's going to be different for everybody.
Right. And I guess I should say that we've gotten to the life after pro section of the conversation.
No.
And I feel like if I were to give any advice, I mean, I'm in the middle of riding right now, so like
Yeah.
it's really good for me to think about this stuff. But find that thing while you're still pro. Find it when you're at the same time as riding. Find something that you think might be that next thing for you, because unfortunately not everybody's going to be able to make enough money from BMX and set themselves up from BMX to where they don't have to live like or do something to be able to make a living afterwards.
Yeah, and it's the life after riding in general, like whether it's just living and surviving is very hard for some people. And
Mm-hmm.
it was hard for me, like I don't think it's something that anybody takes easily because you do something your whole life, and this sport takes so much dedication and so much passion and so much time to get good at that you also feel like, man, I could have been doing something else, and then you kind of get down on yourself about it, like, man, I wish I did something, and that's not it either, because I wouldn't trade any of the things I learned from BMX for the world.
Right.
Uh, there's so many things that you've learned that you can do that are just totally different than anything in the world. The experiences you'll have. I mean, it's crazy to me that I go into meetings with people these days, and they're the as upper class as it gets, and they're like, man, it's really cool that you rode BMX bikes.
And
Like
there's that, and then like I find this all the time where because I have that part-time job at the tractor manufacturer and I've worked with other people for things, there is always a parallel from BMX to another industry that you can find, and to where you're never not going to be able to be useful to something else, because the knowledge that you learn through BMX literally carries over to everything else somehow. It's crazy. There's
yeah.
never been any situation where it didn't.
Yes, and that's so important, and it's I did an interview with Trading Technologies the other week, and it was on my hedge fund, and we were talking about the hedge fund and talking about what we were doing and all of these things, and he kept going like, man, we should talk more about BMX, we should talk about BMX, you seem like you have and it's true, there are all of these parallels that you continue to find as you're doing it, because it's like you know how to fight, like that's the thing,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I said like BMXers can do anything, like I
Yeah.
fully believe that BMXers can do whatever they want to do. And it's in our heads, I think it's you do this crazy thing and you also get in your head and you're like, well, I'm just this crazy guy who does crazy things. I mean, that's how I used to think of myself. I'm a crazy guy who does crazy things. I can't exactly be that guy who goes in and gives speeches on agriculture or like all these things, and then all these years later, that's what I do. Like if
Yeah.
you'd have told me what I did for a living, 20 years ago, I would probably say you're out of your damn mind, and and like, I would have never believed it. But now it's like, yeah, like I get it, and it was part of the path to get there.
Yeah, a couple things here. I do want to recognize that there's a lot of people who are going to be watching this, and people watching this right now, who might not be able to relate as much to this part of the conversation because they aren't the pro level rider getting paid from BMX, or they didn't, you know, live off of the BMX industry. But I feel like no matter what, you can still find that parallel even with what we're saying in what you're doing now, because you might not totally enjoy what you're doing now, and you can use the things that we're talking about to set yourself up to move into a direction that you might like as much as BMX, or be able to enjoy what you do every day. Then there's also damn it, I had something really good that I was going to say and I can't remember it now.
That's how it goes.
Oh, I got it. I got it.
Go ahead.
So yes, there's the parallels between like being a rider and learning tricks and being able to do anything like what you're saying too. But then as a rider, when you are kind of intertwined with the industry as a rider and you learn how things are going, and like you pay attention to like there's these shortages or shipping costs coming from China or making these things go up, or this process is used to make this thing. There's those parallels that I found too in this crossover into everything.
Yeah. And that's really important. And I think, and like you said, there will be people who, the can't exactly understand, because you never, and not to mention, like, being honest, that's a lot of people who will be the ones to say, like, why are you guys talking about money in BMX anyways? And BMX is just fun. Like, no, like, it's not like it's like you going to your job and being like, well, I kind of enjoy this, so like you're not going to get paid anymore. Like, no, that's not how anything goes. It's like, basketball players get, $100 million contracts, like, so
Right.
like there's lots of reasons, not to mention there's reasons why you did Mountain Dew Tour and you got paid a lot of money to win those contests, because you are promoting Mountain Dew. You're
Mm-hmm.
promoting Levi's as a sponsored rider. This is how all of this money comes in. And I just think a lot of people like to really kick that idea down, because they don't want to just say, okay, well, this is sorry, my dogs are going crazy.
That doesn't
But
matter.
this is also a very legitimate thing that we all do too. Like, I don't think a lot of people want to just say that.
Well, I think the people who don't want to say that are the people who either haven't been a struggling professional BMX rider trying to like pay their rent, or they have been that person and then they had to move on and get like a real job because now they're working that 9 to 5 and they can't be a pro anymore because they didn't, like they couldn't keep living the life of a pro BMX rider. And we're just having this conversation now, and I wanted to do this so that maybe that person who's making $500 a month can learn the things that they need to learn and put the different strategies we kind of talk about today in place so that they don't have to go and get that other job, so they can continue sustaining their passion of riding through making money from riding.
Yeah, and the thing anymore is, like, with the internet, for example, there's people I'll have conversation with, and I'll be like, look, like, you could write on supplements, like, let's say
Mm-hmm.
you rider and you really take supplements. You could write on supplements and say how they do for you and what they've done for you, and you could write on your knee surgery and how it's done for you. And, like, these things continue to build up, over and over again, the data of what skate parks are like, what skate park is good, what skate park is bad. You never know what all those things could actually turn into. So, like, finding something, making a website, just doing like what you're doing on here, doing something over and over again like that, will also, one, it could transfer into something else. Two, it also helps boost you as a bike rider too. And three, like, if you can make some extra income on the side, that's always helpful. So there's all these things like what I think with the internet now, there's so many ways to make money, not to mention just like simply flipping things, like
Hmm.
going to a garage sale, finding something that's very cheap. And I used to do this as a kid, as I would find something cheap at a garage sale and then I would sell it. And I would do this over and over and over again. And nowadays with Craigslist and eBay and all this stuff, like it's even easier. And so by the time eBay came around, I would do that even more. And I continued to do that again and again and again. And then it became like that's how I got in the gold industry, which is that I started buying gold from people. You get it normally, like if somebody wants to buy gold, and let's say gold is $1,800, if you're buying it from somebody, you're buying it for under that, because they're just trying to get rid of it. Most of the time they don't even care. uh,
Hmm.
so let's say you're selling it for 1760 an ounce. Usually they're not bringing you a whole ounce, but let's say it's 1760 an ounce, and then you're selling it to somebody for 1900, and you're doing this over and over again, and you're making this little bit of money doing this. And this is also like a beginning of an entire career.
That's a business right there. Yeah.
That's It's a whole business,
Yep.
and like it turned into me talking to a mine in Papua New Guinea, and now I get raw gold from Papua New Guinea and sell it to jewelers. So like these are all ideas that you can kind of start very small, and with the internet now, like anything's possible. Like writing a blog can be profitable.
Yeah, dude. And I think the very beginning of this brings it full circle in that just changing your mindset to think about things in a different way from a business perspective is what leads you down that path for you to find that. So when you make the connection between the fact that, oh, you're a professional rider riding for this company, but you're learning this other aspect of the industry, maybe you're filming, because a lot of people film and take pictures. Maybe you're filming or taking pictures and you're learning this skill, and along the lines or along the way you learn how to do some graphic design. Well, guess what? You are also teaching yourself how to become an asset to the company you ride for, potentially.
Yeah.
Or like you start flipping things and then you end up in the gold market, and now you have this successful thing going on that, had you have never made the connection between the riding side of your brain and the business side of your brain, obviously those two things don't exist that way, but you know what I mean. if
But
you've
it's
never
true.
if you never made that connection and you never thought about things from that business perspective, you probably would have never ever thought to do that. And that's something I've found recently just for myself. Like, I've never really thought about things from a business perspective. And now that I'm just making all these crazy connections every single day. And I'm like, oh, this and this. And it's just like all leading to the same place of, I just want to ride my bike every single day. That's
Yeah.
all I want to do.
And I have so many friends who, I could have this conversation. I could say they could talk about something. I'd be like, "Oh, you'd be really good at this," and give them an entire business idea, and they'll be like, "Well, you know what? I don't really. I feel like that's screwing over people." And I'm just like, "What do you think of? You think?" And then I'm like, "So you think it'd be better for like Walmart to do that? Like you think Walmart's the best one to do things like that? It's just." Trade is how we survive as humans. Like it's a thing we do. You have to get over this fact that like you're asking people for money. Like, yeah, like you're asking people for money. It's a business. That's how that goes. So that's an important part of all this, which is most people feel so weird about that they're happy to like work for Walmart or McDonald's,
Hmm.
but they're not willing to be Walmart or McDonald's.
I think that might be the biggest point of all of this, is that you've
Yeah.
got to change that mindset from the, I'm happier to work for someone than to work for myself as that someone. Because when you become and when you put yourself in the position of being that Walmart or someone, you realize how much more potential there actually is. Because we all know it through a job that you might have every day, that you are making the company more money than what you're getting paid. When you become the company, you get, that's what you get. Like, you get paid that extra money. And when you're smart about all the things we talked about, and you set your prices up accordingly and you set everything up smartly, guess what? You just moved yourself up in life.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, easily. And it's important to understand that, you can do all these things. Like that's the thing that, and it's all about self-responsibility, like understanding that like this all comes down to you. You can't blame people for like, oh, this person didn't help me out, or I wanted to be a professional bike rider but this person didn't sponsor me, or these things. You just can't blame anybody but yourself for these things. So you have to just constantly be, this is all me. This is, if I'm doing bad, that's me. If I'm doing good, that's on me. And so, then that's something, I learned the hard way in my life, of understanding that everything is all about me. And that's the thing. That's how also, but if you think about, if you got good at bike riding, you're listening to this, you got good because you put it on you. Like every time I would lose a contest, I would be so depressed. Like, what did I do wrong? Like, like I wish I could do something differently. And like that drove me to get better and better at riding. But it's the same thing with business. It's like, what did I do wrong? Why am I not making this amount of money? Maybe, and sometimes it's, I have to, this business is wrong. That's something that you have to also be willing to do, is go, well, this doesn't make any sense. I need to be out of this. I need to get rid of this whole company. That might happen, but I think the willingness to try will open your brain. Like, you're for me, like writing and thriller and all these things, like a lot of these things have opened my brain to different possibilities. And if you continue to just kind of go and go, listen to this, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to do this with my taxes now, or maybe I'm going to, keep, like we said, we're not tax guys, but maybe you're going to start keeping track of your stuff a little better. And then maybe you go, well, you know what, I'm going to read this book about business. There's all these very cool business books. And as BMXers, like if you're online and you're doing exactly what you're doing here, or if you're doing, you're posting Instagram videos every day, guess what? You're a fucking marketer.
Yeah, absolutely. You're fine. You're fine.
But guess what? You're a marketer, and that's the thing that's very important, is like that's a huge industry that people don't think. It's another thing that people don't think of it as a business. But one of my clients, he's
Marketing.
a huge market. Yep.
Someone made this, and someone figured out how to do that. Like,
Exactly. So you're a marketer. There's one of my big clients, he's a marketer. He has a marketing company in Atlanta. He's very good at that. He makes tons and tons of money. He's just telling me about his new plan. He's actually just got hired by what's that, Pull Apart. He just got hired by Pull Apart last week. Got some crazy contracts. So he's doing. I mean, this is all, like, you're a BMXer. You're basically a marketer, no matter how you think about it anymore. You have to be marketing yourself. So now here's another part of the industry. So maybe you're filming. Maybe it's just the fact that now you know how to market, so you have a business and you can just market yourself. There's all of these aspects of BMX that's very important.
Yeah, it's wild how, like, every single aspect of BMX can be translated to whatever you might need to do to make money to survive in life. And I really hope that this conversation helps people do that, and that it can be referenced and hopefully be used as somewhat of a blueprint of sorts for people who are in that position. Because the worst thing that I hate seeing is seeing that some legendary rider has to go and get a day job because BMX didn't do enough. They didn't get enough out of BMX when they were in it, or set themselves up for a successful life after BMX. I hate seeing that.
It's tough, and the one aspect that we have to keep in mind at this point is, like, BMX be very different 20 years ago. There's a possibility of really setting yourself up. Nowadays, it's kind of very tough. Like you said earlier, you have to be the top 1%, and not even the top 0.01% most likely these days. And so you have to understand that that's a very big possibility now. So, but because of that, you can kind of go in and go, okay, well, what are things that I might be able to do business wise that could bring in $500 a month, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, and have these goals, like we're talking in these big numbers, but really, like, the goals can be like, I mean, how I started when I was a kid was, I want to make $10 a month. Then it goes, I want to make 20. I want to make 50. want to make 100. You continue to kind of set these goals and you do it, and then like, the human brain is very short-term oriented. So we really overestimate what we think we can do in a week, and we underestimate what we can do in years. And so really like starting small, forgiving yourself for making mistakes, and building up into that. And to get back into the life after BMX thing, I think it's important, like we talked about earlier, is the journey is really, really important to understand that like BMX wasn't some curse to you. That's number one, because I think a lot of people I talk to, they have that in their head that BMX was this terrible thing and they could have been doing all these other things, but they got stuck in BMX and it was stupid. And really, like, it's not the case. Like, you learned something from BMX. BMX was awesome. You had a lot of good memories. You really loved doing it, and you also learned how to be passionate and continue to do something and fight through the bad times. Because if you were any sort of a professional bike rider, I don't care if it's, you did shows for a long time or whatever it was, you have been hurt badly. You have had to get better. You have had to fight through all of these things to get to where you are today. So, you have that in you, and that doesn't go anywhere. And I see a lot of guys who are older just kind of like, well, yeah, I just wasted all those years riding my bike, and it's just not the case.
Absolutely, man. Um, is there anything else that we need to talk about in this whole entire thing?
I think we covered it pretty well.
I feel like the biggest thing that I've got out of this for anyone is just to change, maybe not change your mindset, but expand your mindset early as you possibly can.
Yes.
Expand your mindset from thinking just about riding to thinking about other aspects and how you're going to set yourself up into the future, and just think about more than just next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, I don't want to like extend it super far past the topic. So if we've pretty much covered everything, I really hope this is useful. I thank you for talking through all of this. I feel like it could be huge for anyone who might need it.
I think it's valuable just because, especially for me, as a rider when I was younger, like, I was very fortunate to be around. I mean, my uncle was basically the millionaire next door type. None of us knew. I grew up pretty, like, in lower class. And so, like, none of us knew that anybody in the family really had money like that. Then he died and had a bunch. So I got to see, like, him living with his Buick. His car was a Buick, and like in a very small house, like just very normal. You would have never guessed it in a million years. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had my grandmother, when she moved back to Ohio, she was really financially savvy, very smart at all these things, very computer savvy. So, she taught me spreadsheets and how to do all these things with my own finances. So I was fortunate, but a lot of people, I had to teach a lot of my friends these things because they just never learned.
Yeah, and this is also part of why I wanted to do this in the first place, is that everything we talked about for the most part is stuff that people should learn when they're in high school, but we don't.
Yeah. No, not here, not in the States.
Yeah, it's about as simple as that. We should learn it, but we don't. And some people are lucky enough to have parents who might teach them about these things, but not everybody. So I hope that this can just help somebody.
Yeah, I mean it's a good start, and these are things that if you understand, if you listen to this, we have given basically like when we're talking about keeping track of everything. I'm just talking about spreadsheets. So learn how to use an Excel spreadsheet. Not hard to figure out. There's tons, like you said earlier, YouTube is a great resource. Tons of videos on it. Learn how to do that. That's one thing. And not to mention just going, just like riding, how you have to go into riding, be like, I want to learn this, I want to learn this. Think about it like riding. I want to learn how to use a spreadsheet this week. Next week, I want to make sure I'm keeping track of my money. Next week, I'm going to go through all of 2021 and figure out how much money I used in gas. I'm going to figure out how much money I used in food. Just continue to do these things, and don't do the thing where you go, well, I wish I started this last week and I didn't. Like, just start. Doesn't matter. Like,
Just
start
do it.
middle of the year, start today, start. Luckily it's the beginning of the year. You're great if you start today too. lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, there's no better time for 2022 to start everything that we've talked about today. And there's free resources for everything that we talked about. There's free Google pages or whatever it's called
Oh
for
yeah.
spreadsheets online. You can read all these books. I'm sure there's audio books. Questions. It
Are
just
there
said,
any?
oh, I was like, what? I'm confused. Oh, jeez, that's really funny. Yeah. Is there any questions? We still got 30 people in here hanging out. We can answer any questions if there are any. Um, I think this has been very informative, even just for me. I've been morphing my mindset over the past year, just
Yeah.
just trying to get to that place where
But
this.
you're also doing a thing where you're putting some money aside, like starting to do these things differently. I mean, and that's the beginning, and
Hmm.
and it continues to move from there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think part of what can be hard for the BMXer is that, like, this is what it was for me for the first year or two of the whole, like, being an individual on my taxes and stuff, was like, when you are in a position where you represent companies and all of these things, you might not have to buy that or 400 $500 bike frame. You might not have to buy your bike parts. Like, you might not have the same types of things that you like think you would use as those write-offs. And it took me a while to kind of realize that, and then you just thinking about things from a different perspective.
And realizing that, all of your equipment is a write-off that we're using today, your microphone, your computer, all these
Mm-hmm.
things. If you're a BMXer and you edit on your computer, there you go. Now that's a write-off too. That's a
Yep.
business expense. Your monitors, a business expense, a microphone, headphones.
Yep. Everything that
Your
you. Yeah. Yeah, man, there's no questions coming in. Apparently they're just here to learn.
that works.
Yeah. Um, Somebody did say that, in their opinion, the BMX economy is 3 to 5 years behind the current e-commerce economy.
I agree.
It's
I
interesting though,
can't.
because I don't know if it'll ever fully catch up, because everything is direct these days that you buy, unless you're talking about buying through Amazon. But I wouldn't exactly call Amazon a distributor. But BMX is is so, like, focused on the bike shops and the distributor side of things that I don't think it'll ever fully leave that mindset.
I don't either. And so five, this might even be longer than that. This might be 9 years ago. I started talking about the fact that I wanted to talk to these shops. We did shows all over, especially all over the U.S. And the plan was to go, okay, well, we're going to drop ship frames and bikes to these people. I talked to all the companies. Hey, you make complete bikes. I want to talk to you. All these things, and I was going to just make a drop shipping website. Now, I've had drop shipping companies before, so I already know how to do it.
Yeah.
It would have been very simple. They shot it down every step of the way. The bike shops, the this, the that, and it was like, dude, the rest of the world has moved on to this. And
Right.
what I told the last conversation I had, I don't remember which company it was. Actually, I do now, but I'm not going to say it. The last company I had the conversation with, I said, you know, would you rather me do this or would you rather Amazon?
Yeah.
And that's really what it turns into is, and I get it. Like, I get the other angle of it too. Is like, yeah, sure, I would love to have the bike shops do well. I would love all these things to happen, but if the rest of the world is not going to these anymore in the same way, and they're not doing this, there's nothing I could do. So now we're just kind of behind everybody else.
Yeah.
Like
So
comment.
so
It's a good comment.
my perspective on this is that it could pretty much, not 100%, but pretty much all be completely negated through affiliate marketing if every single company out there for BMX just took up affiliate marketing for their riders and say, You earn your pay based on what you actually do. This means that you could go through a shop, could still end up selling these things, but the rider has to promote themselves. And if they promote, things get sent to a shop or whatever. I mean, that's a different aspect of that side of it. But the affiliate thing brings the responsibility from the company for figuring out what the rider deserves to get paid to. It puts it on the rider for actually doing their job and
Yep.
making their own money from the company. And then there's also the side of shops can move towards that model of how, like, Trek, I think, does it, where if somebody buys a Trek bike off of the internet from a website directly, they won't send it to the person who bought it. They'll send it to the closest Trek dealer or whatever bike shop to get it built, and then the person has to pick it up there.
Yeah, and any other business, like any other business, that's what is done in finance. You bring in money with a client, like you get a certain amount. This is how it's done everywhere. And BMX, once again, that's another thing we're behind on, is that nobody's really willing to do that. And it's like that's a very simple way of doing this. I know, like, John Quartz has been talking about doing that, and people are talking about it, but I've
Yeah.
never seen anybody do it on a major scale. And that would be very important and not to mention, like, BMX is the only one where I'd ride for somebody and be like, I sold 6 frames or 20. I mean, I was in Ohio, riding for companies that were in, California, that nobody, rode frames here. They weren't carried at Changa, nothing.
Right.
And all the kids would be riding those frames.
Yep.
There'd be like 20, 30 frames here. I never made a dime off of any of those,
Right, and that's because right now there's just no possible way to pin rider A to frame A that is sold. And somebody said that affiliate thing can't get tracked precisely. It can get tracked 100% precisely,
Oh
because
yeah,
if you
now.
take away a rider's base salary and they only get paid through the affiliate thing, obviously I'm not saying that's how I would do it, but if you did that, then they have a code or a URL that they don't get paid if somebody doesn't use it. So they're going to be promoting that, and then all sales that come through that website, code or link or whatever, get pinned to that rider immediately. And that is already in itself a million miles ahead of anything that is.
And it's not like being like you're talking about something that's used every day to keep track of things like that. That's used constantly to keep track of things like that, and it works very well.
Yeah.
And in BMX, you're talking about a way smaller scale. Like, this is a way smaller scale.
Yeah.
So yes, it can absolutely be tracked. I mean, the kid, like, kids riding bikes and calling and being like, hey, yeah, I want the same frame that Jason Perz has, in Cleveland. Like, that was also easy to track. But, once again, it was just BMX. Like, they didn't think like that. They didn't do things like that back then.
Yeah.
And really, like, that exactly. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, the same person said, I get you, but anything not bought by that URL will not get tracked. And that is the rider's responsibility at that point.
Yeah.
If you're doing your job, someone is going to make sure that they're using your URL. Brian, we already kind of finished
He's
our
right.
conversation. We went through, we talked about, man, I'm blanking. What did we talk about? The whole conversation.
Which part?
The whole thing. What was the point?
Talking about life after BMX, taxes, how to basically take care of yourself and move into businesses and so on. We covered a lot of topics, actually.
Educating yourself and learning about the different financial things that you need to, as a BMX rider, to try and hopefully set yourself up for the future and having a good life after being a BMX rider.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about. There's Brian Tunney in the chat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, but the affiliate thing, I mean, there's certain aspects of it that wouldn't solve some of the problems, but if companies moved that way, it would just be so much better, because even then you can allow AM riders to get paid. Maybe it's just pro riders who have a base salary that they get paid, and then on top of it, they get whatever affiliate commission they get through they earn. But then you got AMs who use their own code too. They don't get paid a base, but then they get paid whatever they make from the affiliate.
I think it's very money's scarce right now in BMX, but I think it's very important right now for the reason that like this is a way to incentivize people.
Yep.
So they're incentivized to continue to sell your products and so on. And then at the same time, it's the companies don't have the exact amount of money right now to really pay anybody anything. Here you go. Here's some way of doing something like that.
Yep.
And hey, maybe it just goes into a travel budget. Maybe it's not even, maybe you don't get actual money, but maybe it goes into a travel budget, which is what bike riders want. Most people are riders starting out as professionals, upper AMs, just getting into it, would love to have some sort of hey, this is just a good way of me to go travel and ride my bike and do things, and also that also promotes their brand. So putting it all together, this is a good idea.
That, and also you said the money being scarce thing, the affiliate thing. If in a beautiful world where every single company in BMX just adopted this overnight, immediately guess what you find out? You find out why money is scarce, because you find out who the people are that are driving people to buy things. So immediately you find out, well, this guy's not worth paying, because guess what? He's not doing his job. He's not selling anything. Then that also gives you an avenue for how it gives you the literal blueprint for how a rider moves up in a company, because whether we want to admit it or not, BMX is a business, and all of these companies are businesses. So if this AM rider, somebody who's not even AM, they're just some random rider who's connected, they get an affiliate thing, and all of a sudden they're selling all this stuff, and they sell enough to be a pro rider. Well, guess what? They just earned their way to that spot and earned everything that you're giving them.
Yeah, and that's important, because it's and what you said about BMX is a business no matter what, and that's something that a lot of people don't like to talk about. Like back in the day, who was it? There was people. Actually, I shouldn't name names, but it's people that were sponsored, and they would be like, oh, well, this person isn't as good as me, but I knew the dude was a really good dude, and he had a lot of people that he'd bring on, and he got around, and he traveled a lot, and he went to every continent. These are all important, and almost more important than riding. Yeah, sure, you can be a really good bike rider, but you can also be a very good bike rider and not sell anything. It's kind of like in the market. There's plenty of companies that are great companies that their earnings are great every single year, but the companies don't make you any money because the stock is flat. So it's the same with a rider, which is the rider is very good. He can do every trick in the book, but he just stays at Woodward all year long, and he doesn't go anywhere. That's not going to sell any bikes. It's not going to get any people into them. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, dude, I've thought about this so much. Kurt at BMX Union is the first person who talked about that idea with me, and I've thought about it so much since, and it just makes so much sense and solves so many of the problems that we have in the professional side of BMX. That's I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to do that.
I think a lot of people in the industry, if I was to think of it, it would be the way, especially with shows, the way riders act with shows is they'll go out and pump on anything you want on Instagram. That's bike frame, whatever. You could give them a T-shirt, they'll fucking six hashtags of your T-shirt.
Yeah, right.
Bike shows, I'm paying these people a lot more money than they'll ever get from any of that stuff.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they're not going to go out and pump it up or anything because it looks lame, And I think in their head, they were oh, well, if Haro, for example, puts that out, 5 riders are going to be screw this, And I think they feel that's such a big deal, but all that really needs to happen is one of them to try it,
Right.
Give it a shot. And try it, and it doesn't mean drop everybody who's not doing what you think they're doing or whatever. It just means giving it a shot on a small scale, see what happens.
Right. And even then,
Yeah.
like, you get that way of measuring things, and if a rider isn't doing as much as they might need to be doing, well, then you like let them know that that's where they get a chance to like know how they're doing, because right now, like, I feel like how a rider is doing, at least not at the very top, because I feel it's probably pretty obvious that Dennis Enerson is selling parts. Like, that's pretty obvious. But some random dude who's a pro but isn't huge or anything, like, it's kind of ambiguous, I bet, right now, and like objective how he's doing. Like, it probably comes down to whoever the TM is and how he sees it that they're doing. There's not subjective, not objective. There's not like an objective part to it, I bet.
Yeah, I mean every industry. So like with what I do, we're systematized. You know, like
Mm.
I can know every single thing about everybody that we work with, what they're doing, all of these things because we have a systematic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And you know, there's no systematic way of looking at like what's your impact in BMX, what exactly are you doing, and it's very tough. So you know that weighs on these companies, you know, like how exactly do you know who to sponsor besides like, oh, and that's what it comes down to is I get along with this dude well, he's a cool dude, I like his riding, I'm going to sponsor him. And like as you know, like as you said, riding is also subjective. There's so many different types of riders. You could be the best rider and somebody could hate your riding. Not to mention, you know, another thing we should talk about is the way riding kind of kicks itself in the nuts all the time with people who are very, very good, but we go, oh, I don't like in basketball. If you know, there's Michael Jordan is a dick. Everybody knows the guy was kind of a dick, but you know he had reasons for being that way. But nobody's going, oh, dude, like Michael Jordan was like doing really good in the finals, but like I made sure he lost because you know he's an asshole. But
Yeah.
in BMX, like you know, and I could talk about it now because I'm not in competing anymore.
Yeah.
That happened in BMX so many times. I'd watch. There is a what was his name, Jeremiah Jones. Now, super piece of shit person. Like I have no problem saying that either. But I complete like Jason Sutton always taught me one lesson, which is respect the riding. You don't have to respect the rider.
Yeah.
And he was an amazing rider, and he would do the craziest things that he could never place in a contest. You know, like he
Yeah.
never placed in a contest because he, like, I guess he was mad about a place he got at a ECT contest many years ago, and he threw a picture down. Now it was messed up. Not saying it was he was right to do any of that. That was really wrong. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, riding should be this guy did really good today. You should never have a judge telling me how he doesn't like somebody. I
Right.
mean, that's what happened at one of the X Games. I had a conversation. I won't name the judge's name because he's an okay person, but he straight told me that hey, you know, that dude wasn't really like having fun. He didn't seem like he was doing the things he should have done, like, you know, smiling or having a good time. He just looked miserable out there. And honestly, I don't really like the kid anyways. You know, like that's a reason for somebody getting a third place instead of first. Like it's crazy. So you know, there's so much of that in BMX, and I really have always despised that because, especially for someone like me, like I'm a quiet person. A lot of people could make up whatever they wanted to about me, but that was because I was quiet.
Mm.
And so, but because I was quiet, should I get placed differently than someone who talks more? You know, like
Yeah.
that's what BMX does. So it's kind of a bad thing that BMX does that I always wish was different, but you know, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, because the whole judging system for the way contests are judged makes riding in contests exactly the way that it is in contests.
Yeah. Yeah.
As totally, yeah.
We go, let's all write it. Like I turn it on and I'm like, who is that? Is it the same guy? Oh no, it's somebody different. Like I can't tell anymore, you know. And I'm
Right.
not saying that they're not very good and they're not talented. And then not to mention that I look at the judges and I'm like, how are they even like, how can they even relate to some of those tricks, you know? It's very very interesting. But the one thing over all those things, even though that's also a weird aspect, it's always been the fact that like riding should be based on riding, you know, like it shouldn't be like, and I'm not saying like sponsor a person who's a dickhead. Like, yeah, maybe that dickhead's not going to sell you frames, but when you're judging a contest or you're doing these things, you have to make sure it's not a biased opinion for any other reason, you know, just judging the contest straight ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that is like a huge topic.
Dude,
It's like it's a whole nother
we could
2 hours.
talk about that for a week at some point. Just
Yeah, you
just
you really
leave
could.
this time for-
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to drag this out too long because I want people to feel like they can listen to the whole thing being almost 2 hours here. So that being
Yeah.
said, I really hope that this whole conversation helps some people and gives or takes away some of the ambiguity that currently exists and just at least gets people thinking about that side of things because there's so
Yeah.
many people who find themselves at the end of a career and they're like, "Oh crap, what do I do now?"
Yeah.
I'm just
And it's one thing, and that there's another important thing that we should say before we go, which is that you never know when the end's gonna come. You never know.
yep.
You know, it could be today, it could be in 20 years. Like you're never gonna know, and one day your life's gonna be different, and you have to. You know, I had it in my head as a kid that you know I was gonna die by 25 anyways, so it didn't matter. You know, like that's really what was in my head, so it didn't
Yeah.
matter what I learned or what I did, and that was a bad way of looking at things. Really, life is very long. There's a lot of things that you can do, so you might as well take some time and learn and try to figure out what you would do. Because the other thing about it is you have to figure out how to be happy at that time when you're not able to be on your bike.
Yep.
Like that's hard. That's really like the hardest thing you'll ever have to do in your life is figure out how to be happy without riding.
And if you haven't thought about how you're going to live when you can't ride your bike financially at all, it's going to make it that much harder to be happy when you're not riding.
Yeah. And part of being happy is also being stable.
Right.
That's
They
part.
say money doesn't buy happiness, but it sure as heck prevents sadness.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's important to I mean, and not in the fact that you need things. It's just the fact of like surviving is important.
Exactly. So, on that note, anything else from your end?
I think we talked about everything and even got into other things.
Honestly, I feel like it's kind of sad that there's this subject that people say, oh, there's no blueprint or no one talks about this thing. And then we just covered all of it in less than an hour or less than 2 hours.
I mean, it's just important. It's like when you talked about it, and I was like, yeah, like immediately I was like, yeah, great, let's do it because it's so important. And like you said, nobody talks about it. It needs to be talked about. It's something that you're never going to really understand until it is over.
Yep.
But if you could start preparing, start thinking about it, start doing things, and who knows, you might find something you like even more than riding. You just never know. You know,
Yep.
just be open to different things, and you'll learn so much. So I'm glad we got to cover this. This is great. Thanks for having me
Absolutely.
on.
Thank you for doing it. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody.